Radio Cardiff 98.7 FM.
This morning, we're doing things a little bit different. I've got Abu Bakr with us today, and he converted to become a Muslim, and I'm going to ask him, just to tell me a little bit about himself and how come he ended up being a Muslim.
Okay, well, thanks for having me on your show, Raphael. And the peace and blessings of God be upon all those who choose the correct path. One of the reasons why I became a Muslim was because I've always been interested in religion. I wasn't brought up in a religious family per se, but I was always interested in the Bible, especially the historical accounts that took place with the followers of the prophets, and obviously the prophets themselves looking at the message which they were giving to the people. So I think when I really started to get interested in Islam was when I was about a teenager, about 12, 13, 14 years old. And what I was quite surprised with was the fact that Muslims actually believed in Jesus Christ and actually believed in Moses. Because my understanding of Islam at the time was it was very much like a Hindu kind of spiritual type of thing, looking at, carvings, etc. So my perception of Islam was very, very negative, and obviously I was uneducated about the truth behind the religion. As I started to investigate a little bit more, I started to become more and more attached to some of the principles that were laid out in the Quran itself, and obviously for the life of the Prophet Muhammad, his disciples, and obviously to enhance myself in trying to understand the disciples of other prophets that came even before the Prophet Muhammad.
I got a few of my Muslim friends when I was in school.
Okay.
They used to say to me, "Oh, you're a Christian simply because I was born in a Christian country."
Okay.
Now, is it the same? Are you a Muslim because you're born in a Muslim country, or is it sort of hereditary? Are you a Muslim because your dad is a Muslim?
Well, it could be a bit of both. What Islam actually teaches that everyone is born as a Muslim, and what it means by that, in a state of submission. Okay, in a state of obedience. And what happens is, through their life, through development and attachments, etc., is that the parents will change them from that natural disposition into something else. So, yes, people can be born into a Muslim family, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are actually Muslims. It's the choice you make. And as Islam says, there's no compulsion in religion whatsoever. So it is left up to the individual.
Okay, so what does the word Islam mean? Because it means something, yeah?
Well, Islam actually comes from the word which means salama, which means peace, tranquility, harmony, balance. This is what Islam actually means. And if you look at all what the prophets had brought before, it's a similar thing which they were teaching their people. Harmony, balance, reciprocity, this type of interaction between the religious, the spiritual, the material.
Okay, Muslim then. What does the word Muslim mean?
Muslim is someone who submits and surrenders to the will of God. And that's all it basically means.
Let me know, how come you as a Jamaican become a Muslim, because it is really rare for a Jamaican to be a Muslim?
Well, a lot of people would say that, but I think if we look at it from a historical perspective or context, this is not necessarily true. So if you go back, say, for instance, to the 1830s, where there was a magistrate by the name of Richard Madden. He was sent over to help in the apprenticeships in Jamaica, and there was one of the persons that he recognized who he helped to free. His name was Abu Bakr Siddiq, who was a Mandingo, originally from Africa. We also have the likes of Benjamin Latin, who wrote the Quran from memory. This is in Jamaica. We even have Bookman, who was part of the Maroon Revolution in Jamaica that went over to Haiti. Now, these were three Muslims which actually came from Jamaica. So it's not unusual for Muslims or Jamaicans to be Muslims. It's part of our history, but it's something that we're not exposed to. So for me, basically, becoming a Muslim, I'm only following tradition which is already there, but it's a personal choice that I have taken on myself in order to prove, my abilities to do things which I feel is right, and obviously to harmonize the society in which I live in.
That was thanks for the history, because you're really good on the history. What I actually meant, even though what you're saying is right, what I actually meant is there's no mosque in Jamaica, and Jamaica is known as a Christian country. That's what I meant. I mean, I personally, you're the only Muslim that a Jamaican I've met. That's what I meant. But that is good that you let the people and let me understand that, because because it's important, because the Africans were taken to Jamaica. But in Jamaica, we know the Arawak Indians were there.
That's right.
Already, yeah.
That's
so
right.
It's good for you to fill us in. But let me ask you this question.
Okay.
I want you to tell me about the controversy about the translation in the Quran, because when I grew up, a lot of my Muslim friends, they told me that the Quran has never been changed. And I said, well, Abu Bakr and Caliph Usman, They got all the Qurans together and they burnt them all, and they said this is the one to be used.
Right,
which is, and why I'm mentioning this is because, when a Quran gets burned, everybody, there's like practically a war. But yet the first caliphs actually burnt the Qurans. So tell me a little bit about that, please.
Right, what happened to take place? What needs to be clarified first and foremost is that the controversy is not about the translation of the Quran, because by saying it's a translation, it's basically saying that the Arabs or Muslims didn't want it to be conversed in other languages, and this is not the case. So it's not a controversy with a translation, and it's not even a controversy so much with a version. So a translation and a version are two different things. It's a revision. And what we have to understand about during the time of Caliph Uthman was that when Islam started to spread through the world, and by that time it actually ended up in the Russian states, many of those people who were becoming Muslims who were speaking Arabic were not speaking a dialect which was recognized by the Quran. So what was taking place is that they were changing the meanings, and the meanings was not conversing really with the authenticity and the understanding of how it should be understood. So what happened during that particular time, because likes of Uthman and Abu Bakr, they had memorized the Quran from memory, they started noticing that during the prayer time, the people reciting particular verses and it was not accurate. And when they actually looked at some of the Qurans, which was actually being written by non-Arabic speakers who were then speaking Arabic, they started to realize there were mistakes in the terminologies or in the sounding of words. So what happened was all those Qurans were collected and they were literally burnt. And obviously the people who transmitted the Quran from the first generations, they were told to go and collect all the Qurans, listen to all the memorizations by those people who memorized it, and then they collected it in one book. And they said this will be the standard, because this goes according to the primary sources that existed during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be unto him. And that's how it basically came about.
So to my understanding, it's like it was only supposed to be in Arabic or Aramaic, I'm not sure. There was only one language.
It's supposed to be in Arabic. It's supposed to be in a Qureshi dialect, which is the purest of the Arabic dialects. But what has started happening is that people, as they started to move into other countries, they started to synthesize different languages into the Arabic, and sometimes the sounds of certain Arabic letters wasn't being emphasized enough, which meant it was a whole different word or a whole different meaning. And it was something to do with to preserve the authenticity and the accuracy of terminology. And this is why it was burnt.
Yeah, but what I'm asking now is, so what happened with all the different versions now? Because really, we're only supposed to have it in the Arabic, like you said. It's not supposed to be in other versions.
Right. This is the thing. It's not versions. There's no such thing as a version, or, there's translations or transliterations. But it's still the standard Qureshi dialect Arabic.
Yeah, but I mean, like, what about, like, it's in English? I mean, if it's in English, are we losing the authenticity which you mentioned earlier on? Are we losing that because it's actually different?
Yeah, as soon as you translate anything, it loses aspects of its authenticity, just aspects of it. But as long as it's preserved in its original form and people learn the language in its original form, then that's how it gets preserved.
So does that mean then, really, every translation that's different to the original Qureshi language, whatever you said, Arabic, can still be burned and would be okay?
Well, the fact of the matter is, even if you were to burn to the English, different English dialects or translations, it's still in Arabic. And this is what is important. As long as it's in the official or the original tongue, the translation is just a selection of words trying to convey the meanings. The meanings may not always touch, but if that is the language and it doesn't go far enough, and that's the best for that particular language, that's okay, providing that you understand the context in which that language is conveying that message.
Okay, let me just give you another question before you go into another song. Did Muhammad mention Jesus at all?
Yes, Muhammad, peace be unto him, did mention Jesus, peace be unto him, in many hadith. These basically means traditions. He basically seen Jesus, peace be unto him, as his brother, because they come from the same lineage, which is Abraham alayhi salam. Peace be unto Ibrahim or Abraham, from Isaac and Ishmael. So Prophet Muhammad, peace be unto him, is from the bloodline of the Ismailites, and obviously from the Israelis or the Jewish faith. Obviously you get where Jesus actually comes from, or the 12 tribes of Israel. So they are blood relations from that perspective. They share the same grandfather. And he did mention his mother, to defend their honor. And it's not just in the hadiths or the traditions of the Prophet, peace be unto him, it's also mentioned in the Quran. He talked about the followers of Jesus, those people who followed him, those people who refused his message. He even talked about the eschatological elements of the end of time, where Jesus will return at the end of the time in order to bring peace and justice to the earth.
Okay, because we can talk about the end time a bit later.
Okay.
But I want to ask you this, because we talked a little bit about it before when we were talking in your house, because Muhammad, there was a time when he had a chance to show mercy on some Jews, but he ended up killing them.
Right,
so what is, I know you told me, but let people know, what was the reason behind that? Because, you know, obviously people nowadays, they think like Muslims are always killing people and, you know, the things that's happening in the news, that's not good.
Yeah.
Okay, we see them things.
Right,
I mean, I don't know how true they are because, you know, God knows what the TV is really portraying.
Yeah.
So share, you know, why Muhammad actually end up killing them Jews.
Well, he didn't actually kill them, and this is how historians would like to portray this. What actually took place, there was a particular battle that took place in Medina. There was the largest tribe of Arabs which were coming to destroy the Muslims, and the Jewish tribes that were living in the Arabian Peninsula at that time, who were supposed to be allied to the Muslims, decided to join the forces of the people who the Muslims, because the Muslims basically were supposed to protect them because they were paying what was known as the jizya, or the taxes. So that basically means if they're living under Islamic State, you know, we end up building their churches, we end up preserving their religion, and at the same time we have to protect them militarily. And what basically took place that they basically joined forces, obviously with the enemies of the Muslims, and unfortunately they got killed along with them. And this is how basically that came about, unfortunately.
Oh, but didn't Muhammad give the order for them to be killed? He had a chance to show mercy or not mercy, and he ended up having them killed, yeah? Because you didn't say that.
He didn't actually say that. What was actually said by some of the narrators of the history was that the voice came from heaven in order for them to be taken out, literally, in a certain way. But the translation, what actually took place at that particular time, has brought in a lot of controversy. So some people said, well, they shouldn't have been killed. Others said they should have been exiled. Yeah, so there's still a lot of controversy amongst historians what should have actually taken place. So there is still a difference of opinion.
I want to ask you, what's the difference in between a Sunni and a Shiite? And I think a lot of people want to know the answer to this question.
Right. From a basic standpoint or basic level, the difference between the two is based upon, well, basically the split actually came as it was a political movement. And basically it was a choice between who should be the leader. So what the Sunnis were basically saying, that the leader, you know, the leadership should be someone who's qualified and somebody who has memorized or has knowledge in the religion. But what the Shiites basically which basically meant a party, what they were basically saying was it should be from the bloodline of the Prophet, peace be unto him. And this is what the controversy was over. Whether they are educated or not, it still come from his bloodline. And what happened after, through certain civil wars, etc., etc., the split became wider and wider. And obviously there was different understandings to how the Quran should be translated, especially when it comes to politics and Aqidah, which is a belief, or the creed. Yeah, differences of opinion started to come about.
Okay, I'm going to ask you something up to date now. I know you don't really watch the news. I don't know if you watch the news and things like that, or how you stay up to date. But there's something in Saudi Arabia about women and driving. They're saying the traditions say that women shouldn't drive. So
right, okay.
Now, how do you view that point? Should they drive? Should they drive? Or, you know?
Well, the thing is, where does this come from? Is this, you know, because what you have to understand, modernization for people who come from a particular region, it's hard for them to actually get involved with technology. And the reality is, if we look at the history of Islam, we know that women had riding machines, such as camels, donkeys, etc., etc., even the Prophet's daughter. She had 2 camels. So as far as we know from a historical perspective, you know, women can take the lead of driving a home machine, especially if it's a riding animal. So if that gets translated into a modern context, she can drive. But every society determines what it wants for its people. And that's what the Saudis have done.
Okay, let me ask you this. I'm going to ask you another question, but before I do, tell me about, is there an end time scenario? You mentioned it a little bit earlier on.
Okay. For
the Muslims, and what do they say? What is that?
Right, there is an eschatology based in Islam. So basically, there's major and minor signs. So some of the minor signs that the Prophet, peace be unto him, have told us is that one of the minor signs is when a woman will give birth to her master. And what most scholars are basically saying to this particular statement is that women will give birth to children who will end up controlling them. So this will be one thing. And if we look in modern day society today, we see this happening, where children are literally controlling the household, where they don't have respect for their mothers, they don't have respect for their fathers, and sometimes they don't have respect for the elders. We see the proliferation in all people's homes taking place. That is a sign of a disrespect to elder people, and especially to women who are mothers, to creation. So this is the sort of things we need to understand. Other things we need to look at as well is that, as a minor sign, is that one of the signs of the end of time is when a person is killed but don't know why they were killed, and the person who killed don't even know why he or she killed. And this is something that we see rising in the society. So we're seeing where genocidal tendencies seem to be taking place, where the disrespect for life is no longer respected. So these are other things that the Prophet Muhammad has mentioned, and these are some of the things that we've seen take place or manifest within our own lifetime. Other things as well, as a minor sign, is where the Prophet himself, peace be unto him, mentioned, he says, one of the things is where the Arabs will start constructing large buildings. So if you go to places like Qatar and Bahrain, all these Gulf states, you see these massive hotels being built. And what is taking place now, because remember, the Arabs were very a simplistic people. Many of them lived in tents, they lived in houses, etc. And they were very simplistic people. So what seems to be taking place now through modernization, technological advancement, is that now they're advancing themselves technologically. And this is something which they didn't see at that particular time, but which they see now. And obviously there's major signs. One of the major signs is the coming of Jesus, peace be unto him. And one of his mission is in order to try to defeat and to destroy the Antichrist, who we call Dajjal. Another one is the coming of Ad-Dajjal, which means the imposter. It's called Masih Ad-Dajjal, the Messiah who's an imposter. Okay, and what he will do, he will try to pull the wool over people's eyes. He will try to bring a religion to them. He will try to give them a religiosity, a spirituality, in order to lead them away from the path of righteousness. And obviously, another major sign is the coming of the Mahdi. He'll be the chosen one. He will come at the end of time, according to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be unto him, to unite all the Muslims. Because one of the signs of the end of time is that the Muslims will be in conflict with one another, fighting each other. Brother be fighting brother, cousin be fighting cousin. And if we look in a contemporary aspect, we see this taking place, as history unfolds. So this is something we need to understand. The coming of Gog and Magog. Yeah, so these are things which are even in the Christian and the Jewish tradition. So we do have an eschatology, and the Prophet himself has already reinforced what other prophets had told their followers what was to come. We also have the sun rising in the west. Most scientists basically says they're supposed to rise in the east, etc. So most scientists are basically saying, well, what's going to happen? What they believe is going to happen is that the earth is going to implode upon itself, it's going to come back on itself. And the other major sign is the coming of the beast from the earth. And what this beast will be, it'll be a hairy sort of figured individual. He'll be very, very tall. Most people will be afraid of it. And you'll have the ring of Solomon and the staff of Moses. And what he will do with the ring of Solomon and the end of time is those people who do not believe in the Messiah or the books which came before, he will push the ring into their foreheads. And in the Christian revelations, they talk about the sign of the beast being 666. In the Muslim tradition, we say it's kafara, which means a disbeliever. So we do have an eschatology, and it basically talks about mayhem, troubles, trials, tribulations, and these type of things.
But does Israel, is it in your eschatology, anything about the end time, anything about Israel?
Well, it does talk about, in the Christian tradition, they talk about Armageddon, which is a mountain obviously in Palestine or Israel, and that's where a major war will take place. And the Prophet himself, peace be unto him, mentioned this war as well. So it does talk about the sort of conflict which is going to take place at the end of time between, good and evil.
Okay, we're coming to the end of the first half, and I want to ask you a couple more questions, though. How did Muhammad die? Because a lot of people wouldn't understand how he died.
Right, okay. Well, it's a difference of opinion. Most historians, some said he died of natural causes, some said it was through death. through old age. Other people said it was based upon poisoning. So there's different historical accounts to why he died. And I think when we look at a lot of historical accounts, because just like what happens when someone is loved, people like to sometimes rationalize, the reasons why people die, especially if they seem to be good people, just people, try to help people. So, because they expect these people to live long. So this is controversy, basically.
But I thought that he was poisoned by a woman, and he actually said, leave her, because what she's done is okay, forgive her or something. Isn't that one of the stories, or is that just a story?
Well, there's a story where he was supposed to be poisoned by a particular woman because she didn't like his message, etc. Some narration said he was poisoned by a man. So even among scholars, there's a different opinion whether there's a man or a woman who tried to poison him. But what we do know, according to most of the traditions that came down, was that when there was poison on a particular morsel of food, the food actually spoke to him and told him, basically that, I'm full of poison, don't eat me. So some scholars are of the opinion that the Prophet didn't take no more of a mouthful. Others says he did. And that's what probably contributed to his death. So it's still a difference of opinion exactly what happened where the poison is concerned.
Now, why I actually mentioned that is because I know Muslims don't believe that Jesus was killed. They said God wouldn't allow his prophet to be killed. So obviously we should be able to use the same scenario for Muhammad. So God really shouldn't have let Muhammad be killed. If he did die like that, and like you're saying, the scholars would say that probably he did die like that. A lot of people have said that. Because my thing is with you, and we've talked it before, but not you, the Muslims. It's like, if Jesus didn't die, we couldn't be Christians. So, so Muslims say Jesus never died, which in a way says that Christianity is not real. That's the only thing that I have against the Muslim. I just want to know, what does Black History Month mean to you?
Well, Black History Month is to regenerate a consciousness to our historical past, especially where our contribution, achievement and accomplishment is concerned. Because unfortunately through the slave trade and our experiences and the colonialism, we were denied this basic aspect of our own historical consciousness. And basically what Black History is to bring that back to us in order for us basically to feel good about ourselves, that we are people of something and somebody's, and that we have achieved things in the past and we can achieve things for the future.
And that's important because, obviously when we grew up, we knew what it was like to sort of be oppressed because of the colour of our skin.
Yes.
Which is wrong, anyway, no matter what happens.
That's right.
But when you try and tell people what it was like, a lot of people who never experienced that, especially like people of colour, black people, they might not understand that or see that. And I think it's important because there are still people who look down on us and treat us bad. I mean, if you go to court or the police or certain aspects of in this country where people are, you don't see many black people there.
That's right. Well, I think we have to understand, obviously during the rise of colonialism, what was established universally was this concept of pigmentocracy. And what that basically is where people of varying colours would take particular positions in a hierarchical structure. So obviously the lighter you were within that society was the more upwardly mobile you became. And obviously the darker you were was the more lowerly you came within that society. And that seemed to have established itself not just within obviously the European nations, but is even established even in our own countries. Even if you look in our own country in the Caribbean, as you move up the social ladder, the people get much and much lighter, because many of them are the children and the grandchildren, great-grandchildren of the British. And this is one of the things that they made sure that they instilled into those countries in order to make sure they had a foothold in the Caribbean islands to maintain what they refer to as the Commonwealth.
Okay, just tell me, when did we start acknowledging Black History Month in this country?
Well, Black History Month was first acknowledged round about the mid to late 1980s. Obviously, they were done probably more or less in Saturday schools, because in America they celebrate it during February, and obviously in this country we celebrate it during October. But it's round about the early 80s. When they actually came to Wales and Cardiff, it was round about 2006, 2007.
So it's not a long time, really.
It has been a long time for it in Wales or in Cardiff, especially, yes.
But it's a good thing, you know, like you're saying, like to be acknowledged for the, you know, the achievements that black people have done, and like we're people at the end of the day, and we want to be treated just like everyone else.
Well, that's it, and I think it's about value. I think, you know, one of the things you have to understand about cultural constructs or things that we determine within our culture is not just a belief system or a language. You know, there's morals, customs, norms, values. Now, when we look at the aspect of values, I think one of the important factors here is that we have to value ourselves. And by valuing ourselves, we need to acknowledge and understand our accomplishments and achievements of the past and that we can do it for the future. And it's that inner motivation that is needed in order for us to achieve those goals.
I mean, I remember, you know, when you're in school and they teach you that you can do anything. They, you know, when you leave school, like, the sky's your limit sort of thing.
That's right.
But, you know, we've never really seen a black prime minister. I mean, thank God they got the first black president in America, which has taken a long time.
Yeah.
But, you know, but I am the sort of person who believes that, you know, a person can do anything. I kicked off that part of the show with a song called I Just Don't Want to Be Lonely. That was from Leroy Morrison. And then we had Jesus First, Everything Comes After. What I'm going to do now, I just want to ask Abu Bakr just a couple of questions. The first thing I want to ask you is this. Do you know where, like, Muhammad, he got married a few times. How many wives did he have?
Overall, it was 9 wives. Overall.
Because Muslims are allowed to have 4 wives, isn't it?
That's right.
Is that
Yeah,
right,
they're allowed to have 4 wives. Up to 4 wives. Yeah.
So why was he allowed to have 9?
Because he was a prophet. He was just similar to, like, why Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they were different. Prophets are different to, obviously, the disciples and their followers.
Okay, and one more question. Because he married a girl, she was 7 years of age, wasn't she?
No, she wasn't 7 years of age.
How old is she?
Well, she was a teenager. She was a teenager.
He said different records of that, because some say she was 7, and then he said they consummated the marriage at 9, so... He said different versions, because you would know, he said.
Well, it is different versions, but what you've got to understand at the time is that most societies were marrying young girls anyway. So the thing about it is that they wasn't doing anything, you know, illegal or different to what was being practiced at the time. It's like when I ask people, what was the age of people who used to get married in this country? Young girls, they don't tell you. But if they look at it, it was the same age, 9, 10, 11, because young girls matured much quicker. And if you load the history of this country, it's only up until 1929 when they passed the Age Marriage Act. Girls in this country getting married as young as 12 years old.
Well, you know, I didn't know that, so obviously we're learning things because, like, well, you know, different people, different communities, you know, and different cultures have different customs. Cause
that's right.
I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking, you know, about Muhammad and, you know, about the young people that he married. And he said, well, in the Middle East, he said women mature different. That's what he told me. That's why I asked you. You know, was there different controversies about the age of the girl?
Well, the controversial of age only comes now because what's taking place now is that most societies, especially in the last probably 50 to 100 years, have upped the age of consent. But if you go back maybe 500 years ago, yeah, you'll find the marriage is different. I've got records in this country where children are married at the age of 2, 3 years old. I have those documentations at home. Yeah, in villages in England and Wales. So, you know, so this is like 15th, 16th, 17th century records. So these were type of acceptable behaviours at the time. Now, because we live in a society now where we're probably a bit more sophisticated and we're regulating society and we're putting age of consent consent on, it doesn't mean that basically that this is what was practiced years ago.
Okay, and one of the things we talked about, because you were saying to me that before Muhammad, I think you said, that there was no restriction on how many wives you could have.
That's right.
And I said, well, you know, the Bible does give restrictions on wives, even though Solomon did have, like, was it 300 wives and 700 concubines?
That's right, yeah.
We know that from the Bible. But when Jesus came, he said it was because people were sort of hard-hearted, and that's why divorce was given. But really, God wanted one man to be with one woman, and I believe that most women you speak to would say, yeah, I just want to be with one man, you know. But then again, you say society changes, and God knows what people start to think.
Well, the thing is, if we're looking at plural marriage and stuff like that, this is an old age system. You know, and all Islam did come is to regulate the system, because men were obviously taking more than one wife, and they were actually abusing the women. Yeah, especially where their financial assistance was concerned, their emotional security was concerned. They wasn't actually reimposing or trying to structure those things on those guidelines. So this is why it came, because Muhammad didn't come to change the culture of people; he came to enhance it. And this was a culture which was in Africa, Middle East. It's still there even till today, whether people practice Islam, Christianity, Judaism. These things are still practiced.
Okay, well, obviously there seems to be a lot of controversies and a lot of things, okay? So this one song, Abu Bakr, why did you change your name? Is that something that you do when you become a Muslim, or is it something you chose to do?
No, you don't need to change your name. The fact is, I was given the name of two people, you know, obviously Augustus and Richard. And historically, I have no relationship with these people. I was named after Richard the Lionheart and Augustus Caesar. You know, so for me personally, I was always conscious about my identity. I see myself as an African, and I gave myself a name which corresponded with African people. So Abu Bakr was that type of name which I chose for myself.
So you're very conscious. But let me just ask you a question. You know, your parents, your grandparents, I think they would have been like the first sort of West Indian people sort of in this country, is that right?
That's right. It's my grandparents who came over in the 1950s. Obviously, my father's side, they settled in Gloucester. My mother's side, they settled in Barry. And what happened was, obviously, around about the mid to the late 1960s, they sent for their kids, obviously being my mother and father, who met over here, and obviously had me. So,
you know, what does that mean to you then? Do you see yourself as like a British person, or do you see yourself as like a sort of West Indian, or like in between? How do you see yourself as a person?
I see myself first and foremost as an African. It was a consequence of a West Indian or a Caribbean, but I see myself as an African first and foremost. Yeah, African Caribbean, fair enough. If you want to put another title on me saying I'm black, you can do that. But I first and foremost see myself as an African. I identify myself with a race, and African people are a race of people. And then, obviously, if you're going to get into ethnicities and stuff, then we can bring it down even further. But that's the race I identify myself with.
And a lot of people might not understand what Abu Bakr is saying, but I understand, because like in this country, you know, when you're black, people sort of, you're ostracized. People, you know, they don't treat you as a human. So like for me, the thing is, for me, I felt so bad. My parents were Jamaican, and I wanted a Jamaican passport, because I thought, you know, I'm being treated so bad.
Yeah.
Let me get a Jamaican passport, and I guess I'm a Jamaican, you know, even though I was born here. So anyway, what I'm going to do now, we're going to, you know, just thank you for being on the show.
Okay.
And I hope to see you again. We can do another talk. You know, I like the knowledge you bring to the show. That's really good.
Okay.
Radio Cardiff 98.7 FM.